Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, it is a great pleasure and an honor to introduce this panel in such outstanding company. I have deep admiration for every panelist sharing their thoughts today, and for everyone from UNICEF to the Ministry of Finland with this learning journey possible. So we don't assemble because we agree, look alike, are socially compatible or wish to fuse together, but because we are brought by complex challenges, opportunities and concerns. Our common future holds immense promises when it comes to the convergence and democratization of AI and other dual-use technologies. For instance, there is an untapped potential to experiment AI from the street, to empower diverse communities of young users around the globe to learn how to turn their data, ideas and designs into AI innovation. What if the next generation across our cities could be globally connected, locally inventive, and inspired by a diversity of knowledge and vision? And the same knowledge sharing should take place within the AI industry and multilateral fora, with the hope to foster strategic foresight dialogues and together define what the future of child-friendly AI looks like. This global call for action is even more crucial when you think about some of the matters of concern, including how AI converges with other dual-use technologies, from biometrics to neurotechnology, with the increasing capacity to commodify children's behaviors, with implications for children's mental privacy, integrity, and agency. So the task ahead is therefore complex, but I have with me a stellar group of panelists. First, we have Ms. Ecem Yılmazhaliloğlu, who is the founder and gender equality advocate for TechnoLadies. Our second panelist is Mr. Zeng, who is professor at the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Our third panelist is Mrs. Hoda A.Alkhzaimi, who is the director of the Center for Cybersecurity and Interdisciplinary Studies at New York University, Abu Dhabi. And our final panelist is Mrs. Yuping Chen, who is Senior Program Officer with the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Technology at the United Nations. So all our panelists have a lot to share, but I will start with you, Ecem, as you have in-depth and on-the-ground expertise about how to promote diversity and equality to include youth and marginalized communities in the present and future of child-friendly AI. And so I would like to ask you to speak about two important milestones. First, what role do diversity and equality play in the development and deployment of child-friendly AI in present and future? And second, how can youth and marginalized communities engage in the global discussion around AI and the policy-making process? So the floor is yours, Ecem.
Thank you so much. I want to start off by saying that AI has a huge potential to change all of our lives for the better, and especially the lives of children, helping future generations grow up in safer and more prosperous societies. The AI systems that we develop today have the opportunity to give these children more accessible and personalized education, better health care and diagnoses, and even provide them with healthier, cleaner food and more accessible water. However, we need to fully recognize that as much as these AI algorithms provide us with a lot of advantages and a lot of opportunities, they also present us great risks. If undeveloped and deployed with our human values of diversity, inclusion, and equality in mind, these risks that these AI systems present us with will surpass the benefits and end up putting us and the future generations, and especially the more vulnerable populations, such as children, youth, and marginalized communities, in great danger. Risks that we have in the field of AI right now, from what I've seen through TechnoLadies and through my own experience as well, and actually one of the biggest obstacles that stand in the way of child-friendly AI is bias. Especially in the past couple of years, we have seen a lot of examples of this bias. We have seen facial recognition algorithms performing poorly on people of color and women, hiring algorithms that penalize resumes containing the word women, and ad algorithms not showing house ads to anyone with a minority background. And the root cause of this bias, this alarmingly dangerous bias algorithms, is the lack of diversity and equality in both the teams that develop and deploy these systems and the data that we use to train these systems. And therefore, I want to say that diversity, equality, and inclusion play major roles, key roles, in really achieving child-friendly AI. Because when our teams and our data do not represent every single race, gender, ethnicity, age, religion, and other demographic features or other demographic variables of every single person who are going to be affected by those algorithms, of every single child who will interact with them, the output will only benefit a certain homogeneous group. In other words, the lack of diversity and inclusion that we have in the field will translate into bias, threatening the well-being and the rights of the more vulnerable populations, of the very children that we're trying to protect and help thrive. And if we do not ensure this diversity and equality, the AI systems that we develop will always discriminate against those that are underrepresented in the field, that do not have a proper voice in the table, such as youth, again, the children, and the marginalized communities. The thing is, AI is playing a bigger and bigger role in all of our lives, and even today. And I can't imagine how big of a role it's going to play in the lives of future generations. Therefore, if our all algorithms are biased, they will exacerbate, and they actually already do exacerbate the inequalities, the very inequalities that we have in our societies, exposing the children, the young-minded children and the youth of today and the adults of the future, of course, to these huge gaps of equality that is in our societies from a very early age. And think about children growing up with these biased algorithms. For example, in TechnoLadies, when we had these conversation sessions, we saw a lot of people who interacted with online translators who only translated doctors with he, him pronouns, basically just discriminating between genders when talking about certain jobs. And think about children growing up with these bias algorithms in their classrooms, in their healthcare systems, in their exam platforms, in their games. Think about neurodivergent children or children of color performing worse on their exams because the proctor software does not recognize their faces or their certain actions while they're taking the exam and decides to cancel, which is an actual case that happened last year when world switched to online learning because of COVID-19. So this is what we need to prevent from happening. And that is actually the very crucial role that including everyone, including the youth, including the children, including all of those minorities, all of those marginalized groups, play in the development and deployment of child-friendly AI systems. And as for the second milestone, we as the youth trust adults, those who are in power right now, to provide us with a safe and healthy environment that we can thrive in, and fair child and youth-friendly algorithms that we can use to basically improve our lives. It is the adults' responsibility to think about how to prevent this bias from creeping into these algorithms and affecting the youth, us, and the children. And I believe that one of the best things that this global forum does achieves is that, and also what we work towards achieving in my organization, TechnoLadies, is that we are trying to make sure the adults who develop these algorithms think about what children would need. And as we, the TechnoLadies team, and many more organizations nowadays are working towards achieving, we need to empower these underrepresented communities and make effort to reach out to them, making sure that all of them are represented, all of them have the voice that they deserve, have the place in the table that they deserve. Because the algorithms who are going to affect just everyone, every child, and shape their lives, shape their futures, are being developed by adults. And the only way to make sure that the adults are well aware of the children's needs and their perspectives is to include the children into the actual conversation. Because if not, then the end products are just not going to be geared towards them. They're just going to be geared towards, again, single homogeneous group. And therefore, I believe that in order to achieve child and youth-friendly AI, and actually the AI for good concept in general, especially in terms of children, we need to make sure to, again, include their voices. So the question becomes, how can we engage youth, children, and the marginalized communities in the process of creating these inclusive AI algorithms, right? How can we include them into the conversation? Basically, what we can do is that we can lend them a helping hand and lift them up, and make sure that they're represented by giving them the support, the communities, and the space and the tools that they need to exist in the table. For example, to achieve this with TechnoLadies, we are working towards leveling the playing field for all genders, especially as well as minorities, and support those who identify as those marginalized groups, and especially again, primarily women. And we are trying to help them get involved with tech by basically providing them the tools that they need, the coding experiences, the role models, the support systems that they need through a variety of events, such as workshops and summits. And we have gotten a lot of positive feedback that even a brief 2-hour workshop can actually help a young child, help a young woman realize that they can exist in this field and that they have the right to exist, and they just belong there. It made them it helped them realize this, and I think that is really important. And again, from what I've seen through TechnoLadies and my gender advocacy work, gender equality advocacy work, is that the youth and children are thrilled to be in the conversation. We are trying to exist in the conversation. For example, AI for All created this open source AI, this open AI curriculum a couple of years ago, and this AI curriculum was accessible to every high schooler, and many high schoolers. I'm talking about thousands of high schoolers use this resource to first teach them about AI, its technical basics, and how it affects their lives, and then their communities. Then they took these resources that were given to them, and they taught it to their communities, to their schools, to their organizations. And what we saw there was just a really good example of how reaching out to youth and these marginalized communities can lead to a spread of knowledge at an exponential rate, with just more and more youth and children getting involved in the field as a result of just one single initiative. So this is primarily, again, because we do want to engage. The youth and the children do want to engage, but they do not have the means to do so. They do not know where to start or how to fit into the picture. So we need to create them the space to exist, to grow, and to get into the field. We need to help them gain access to these resources, such as the OpenAI curriculum and the tools, through accelerated programs, fellowships, workshops, summits, other open resources, and basically similar projects that provide them with what they need. Again, like the AI for All's OpenAI curricula, TechnoLadies, World Economic Forum's AI Youth Council, which I'm a part of, and this very project that UNICEF actually has founded and led for the past couple of years. To sum up, what I'm trying to say is that diversity and equality are the most crucial, almost the most crucial forces for developing child-friendly AI algorithms, and the lack of them will cause us great danger in the future, a danger that we need to be aware of. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We're getting close to the, I'm watching the time, but many thanks for your insightful remarks, and the work you are doing is truly exceptional. So I wanted to let you know. Now I would like to turn to Professor Zeng and explore academic perspectives on how to better understand the long-term impact of AI on children's rights and think ahead about adequate safeguards. So I will ask you, Professor, first, why do children need special protections in an AI-enabled future? But second, also, what could the long-term implications of AI on children be, and what should we do about it? And you have about 8 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the two very interesting questions. I think for the first two questions, really that I think we all agree that children are among the most vulnerable groups. So this is why actually in our local regional trying as AI for Children Beijing principles last year, we were talking about children first because they are the most vulnerable groups. Well, first, two things that I would like to raise is that first, in many cases, they don't have enough abilities and willingness to express themselves just as what our adults do. So this may cause them very easy to be hurt. My second point is that when they were actually hurt, they just don't know in many cases. Hence, they will have huge negative uh, actually effect that we didn't expect from AI to the children. So I would give two of the examples in here. One is, let's say, facial recognition at the gate of the kindergarten. Actually, when girls and boys saw that, oh, this is quite interesting, it can recognize me. And then the machine said that, oh, you're on time for the kindergarten today, and they will laugh. But actually, they just don't know what is the negative impact that this kind of system bring to them. Long-term negative impact once their facial data was actually captured. They just don't know who is really maintaining that. So who's hosting the data? Who is the service provider? Is the kindergarten or a technology provider? Does the technology provider have have enough actually the expertise to protect their data? They just don't know, and they also don't know that once their data has been actually captured, this will have long-term negative effect for for their whole life, so so this is example number one. My second example is that just one day ago that when my girl was interacting with a chatbot, she was like, yeah, you just cannot understand me, you stupid or not. And the chatbot said, I'm not stupid, I'm just a dumb. So you see that the way that the chatbot is interacting with the children is not the way that two children or their parents are interacting with each other. You cannot say, I'm not stupid, I'm just a dumb. So maybe they just don't understand what it means. But when children choose to use this kind of sentence for interactions, I think this is a disaster for them. So about the long-term negative impact on next generations, I think first thing that I would like to raise is tools against friends of the society. That means for now we're creating AI that is actually a tool that processes information that seems to be intelligent, but actually it's not. It pretends to be intelligent. But for many of the children, they see AI or chatbot as quasi-member, as friends to interact with. And we never tell them the true story that they're just a tool for now. They don't have consciousness. They don't really understand what you say. They are just processing, the text without understanding. While the children doesn't know. And many AI technicians just tell them that AI is close to what we mean about human. You can't treat AI as a friend. No, it's not. It's just a tool. But when the next generation perceive them as quasi members of the society and making friends with them, we're giving them the wrong, incorrect impressions. The second point that is related to long-term negative impact is what we talk about, the emotion recognition in the classroom. It's not only have the problems on privacy, but also that have very long-term negative impact. Thinking about a scenario that I have a 3-year-old girl, and maybe 15 years later that she would like to say, "Dad, I'm going to college. Any suggestions?" If I suggest that she would go for AI, I think she probably would say no, because actually she could say, "Oh, this guy has been spying on me for more than 15 years, starting from my kindergarten. So how can you say that I'm going for this as a profession and to create something to spy on others?" I think the next generation wouldn't have the interest to do that. My last point that is related to long-term negative impact is the negative problems for metaverse. I think this is for the first time in human society, we are pushing our next generation to nowhere before we understand it ourselves. Actually, this distract the next generation's interest to the physical reality. To me, when I was bringing my girl to a dancing class, I saw a boy interacting with virtual reality for more than an hour. I think this is a disaster. To me, it's a disaster because I think he should spend quite more time on the physical reality to interact with their friends, parents, not to really go into virtually nowhere. So I think the core for now is really that AI should bring realities, should augment realities, not really to provide a virtual and augment complement to reality, instead of creating a parallel universe of nowhere that will bring the next generation to nowhere. So I think this is why we have to have long-term responsible AI with children first for their future. Thank you.
Many thanks, Professor. Many thanks. Your remarks were very enlightening. Now I would like to turn to Hoda, who has a very unique and in-depth expertise on how to empower children to shape the future of the AI industry. And there, Hoda, I would like to ask you to share with us your thoughts on first, what are the main factors that we should focus on when we create and shape AI for the future of children, and how do we make this effort value-driven? And then second, what is the global call of action that we should focus on when aiming to empower children within the AI industry? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eleonore, for the questions. I think we need to start with the realization that children makes 2.2 billion of the population of the world. So they're almost around 28% of the population of the world. And the decision-making process of how we build the next platform of technology, or the next wave of immersive technology that's coming ahead of us, needs to be as well in the hands of children. Now, how can we do this and go beyond the narrative, the current narrative and conversation of the challenges that exist on the table, beside the biases, beside the involvement of children across board in the development process of AI? We need to really realize that there is a specific power that exists within building specific technology. The power that we have at the moment is that we have, number one, a wave of digitalization that is happening globally, and this wave of digitalization is taking a toll on children. According to the OECD report, over 70% of children are connected in the UK, for example, on their devices on a regular basis. This connectivity, as what Professor Zeng has highlighted rightly, has a huge effect on rewiring the way children make a decision, or the way children will perceive life and reality, because they spend over 70 to 80% of their time on their tablets, on their technology, on AI-enabled environment across board. So, and it affects their well-being. According to the Goldilocks effect, that says the more time you spend on these screens, the lower your well-being functionality will have, not as a children only, but as a human beings. So how can we take these challenges and flip the coin to the advantage of children, knowing that we are living in a world that have a global rise of investment that goes beyond 3.2 trillion when it comes to immersive technology and AI technology. We need to make sure children is always about purpose. If you give them a game, or if they give them an AI enabled environment, they will fulfill the purpose driven environment more than an adult will have. And that's what the experiments have shown. So, the number one aspect that we can focus on here is to work on enabling AI centered environments that support the development of children well being, for example, that ensure that the inclusivity aspects of children, prioritize their fairness and non-discriminatory practices for children, protect their privacy and safety, and ensure their safety on these environments. How can we do this? If there is a systematic bias, you need to make sure there is a systematic design to eliminate these biases and to eliminate all of the structure of challenges that exist in the system. Can we do this? Yes, we can do it, but not alone, not as an adult, community and society. Because if when it comes to designing it, for example, AI platform, we need to first make sure we design a purposeful platform and a purposeful industry on AI. And I would like to give you an example, for example, for the gaming industry, AR and VR industry, the metaverses industry that is taking the world by a flame and a wave at the moment. The way we develop this AI, for example, we need to make sure it's centered around purpose for children, and it's centered around tackling few issues that goes beyond raising the awareness. I would like to highlight an effort of colleagues in the Netherlands that developed something that's called Hack Shield, which is a virtual reality platform that enables children to get into the platform and tackle and solve issues and challenges that pertains to security and privacy of children on the platform. So children are solving these challenges to empower children to understand how these security challenges will compromise their existence on a digital platform. If you go online and if you join Hack Shield platform, you can see that they engaged as well the local police municipality community to award children specific real awards that would enable them to be, for example, an investigator of a case, and or for example give them an honor of this reward beyond just being an investigator of the case. What did they do to also empower children? They encourage children to co-develop with them the game by building different levels on the game that they could put forward so other children could play games that has been designed by children. So what the purpose that is being achieved here, you raised awareness, you involve the children, you help them design also a different game that other children could play to raise awareness to these kind of flows of privacy and security that exist online. You engage the public stakeholder to give children acknowledgement to their existence in virtual reality. Now, can we level up the purpose that these children can contribute to? Imagine having a game around the world that's focusing on children developing solutions for sustainable development goals across board, and get them involved into solving climate issues in different parts of the world, or solving economic issues in different parts of the world through gaming industry, engage stakeholders that will prototype the technology for children and eventually bring this children innovation to the table to make an impact. So what did I do here? I made sure that AI time or children time on an AI platform was actually purposeful, was actually meaningful for children. And I walked beyond the biases that could exist on these platforms. So you asked me as well, Eleanor, a great question when you said, what should be the public call here? The public call for us is for number one, create a funding cycle where we develop AI, AR, VR, metaverse solution for children by children. Let's break this cycle where we expect always adults, scientists, psychologists to only develop the games for children and give the children the free play online available open resource platform, open R&D platform to build their own gaming community. So, and the second aspect is actually that provide an open R&D process that is accessible for children everywhere to build their own solutions and put them on the table, and not just build a virtual solution, but bring in the likes of big industry players for them to endorse this and bring it on the table with the IP, with the intellectual property being preserved for children. The third element here is let's develop purpose around AI. Make sure that it's purpose driven and not just meaningless contribution or utilization of a child time that could lead to violence, that could lead to creating polarized views against really reshaping the next phase of the future. Let's make sure, as I said, that we build AI for purpose and for children by children. Thank you so much, Eleanor.
Dear Hoda, many thanks for your invaluable remarks and your will and energy and a lot of examples actually that show us how to move boundaries. I will now turn to Mrs. Chang, who faces the complex but interesting challenge to help define the unique role and assets of the UN to promote normative discussions on the present and future of child-friendly AI. Mrs. Chang, I will ask you, first, how is the UN playing a role in global AI discussions and regulation, including with regards to children? And then what are the key challenges and future opportunities to advance international cooperation through the UN on this topic? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. And really, it's an honor to be here with distinguished panelists and to hear all these very interesting views. I mean, I think other panelists have really gone to the heart of the issue, that it is an urgent concern that we have to address, particularly as we look towards the future. If we talk of the generation that is to come and shaping a digital future that is inclusive, safe, and empowering for all, we really need to look at what it means for our children and start now, because by the time we get there, 15 years later, it'll be too late for the children that are now online and are so profoundly affected, as others have said. And this is part of why at the United Nations, the Secretary General has laid out a vision for a more open, free, and secure digital future for all, with a particular emphasis on the future generations and the youth as part of shaping this digital future. So, for instance, at the United Nations last year, the Secretary General issued a roadmap for digital cooperation that looks at such key areas as digital human rights, universal connectivity, and artificial intelligence, where he precisely stressed what Ecem had mentioned before, the need for minority and voices from developing countries to be part of the global AI discussions to make sure that what we come up with on AI reflects the views of all. And so this is why I do think that this element of child-friendly AI has to be part of that conversation as well. Recently, the Secretary General also issued what he calls his Common Agenda Report, which sets out a vision for the United Nations in the next 25 years, not just on digital technology and technologies and AI, but more profoundly, how the world should look like in response to calls from over 1 million people as part of the UN's 75th anniversary. And in that, again, this notion that we must look to the future, the children, the future generations, was very stark in all the responses from all stakeholders that responded to the UN's call for a conversation on what we need for the future of the international community. So in all these aspects, the intersection of artificial intelligence, the impact of emerging technologies, and future generations and children was very profound. And that's why I think the UN is approaching these issues at that confluence of these key discussions today. And the contribution of all of you, your voices are particularly important in making sure that it really does reflect the next generation and the needs of the next generation. So, for instance, I think that where the UN is playing a role is on areas such as rights. You might have noticed that earlier this year in March, for instance, the United Nations Treaty Committee on the Committee on the Rights of the Child, which is the governing human rights body that looks at the issues of the rights of the child and making sure that governments fulfill their obligations to children's rights, actually issued a general comment on the impact of digital technology and new technologies on children and what this means for countries' human rights obligations. Artificial intelligence was mentioned in some of those aspects, and really we need to pull out those aspects such as privacy, mental health, the need for children to be part of that conversation around human rights and what this means for the governance of future technology. We've also seen at the United Nations, besides these broader normative type discussions, also programmatic and policy work by UN agencies such as UNICEF that is organizing the conference today to develop policy guidance for governments, for stakeholders, for private sector companies to look at how this precise aspect of AI for children should be taken forward. So, for instance, I think UNICEF has just issued, with the support of the Government of Finland, policy guidance in this particular area. And I do encourage everybody to look at how this can be part of the work of organizations and governments as well. We should also lead by example here at the United Nations. In our programming, be it by UNICEF or by the World Food Programme or other agencies that are working with youth and children, we have to see how our own policies will impact on or use new technologies in ways that are rights protective, that take into account the views of children and empower them and make sure that they are safe in this new digital environment. I would also say that in part of the UN's work, in making sure that children are empowered and safe online, particularly by the use of AI or other technologies, we also need to not forget the fact that even though we take AI technologies for granted, and that, as colleagues have said, many children are connected, there are also children that are not and don't enjoy the possible benefits of AI. So besides addressing challenges, we also have to see how we can realize and harness technologies for those that are still unconnected. The International Telecommunications Union just issued a report yesterday that said that at this current moment, despite a boost in connectivity due to COVID, 2.9 billion people still remain unconnected online. At the height of the pandemic, UNESCO and UNICEF estimated that as much as 1/3 of the world's population of children were unable to access education because they had no remote learning options. So even as we talk about the challenges of AI for children that are connected, we also have to consider the children that do not have access to digital technologies, basic internet connectivity, and so are deprived of the benefits of technology. So I do think it's really, as I think other colleagues have spoken about, this dual part of the problem. How do we make sure that we harness the benefits of AI, digital technologies for children, at the same time mitigating against the challenges and harms that could be brought about in terms of privacy, their mental health, and so forth. So I think that duality is where the UN is really grappling with today. And that is why in 2023, the Secretary General is also calling for what we call a global digital compact, which will be a coming together of member states, governments, private sector tech companies, and civil society advocates, and hopefully young people and the youth, to make sure that we can have a common understanding on what is the digital future we want. I see having child-friendly AI as being part of that critical conversation to make sure that we precisely address the concerns that everyone else has raised. I also want to sort of emphasize the point that other colleagues, Hoda, Ecem, had really mentioned, that it really does come down to inclusion in process and inclusion by design, and making sure that children are at the heart of what we do in terms of what we design, platforms, products, and so forth. It is not a coincidence that the majority of the products, digital products and services and items that we use in our everyday life when it comes to ICT technologies are designed by predominantly white, Western males who are older. And so that is why a lot of the issues that we are confronting today have to do with the fact that there is exclusion already in the design, research, development, usage process. And that is something we need to address, be it by representation, inclusion, conscious steps at making sure that children, women, and girls are part of this conversation around the design of technology, the use of technology, and the implications as well. So as somebody who has been very privileged to be part of this majority female panel, I do think that this is part of the work that is so important that all of us step out to the plate to make sure that in the design of this digital future, it is fully inclusive of not just children, women and girls, minorities, as well as those underserved communities that have traditionally been left out from the benefits of technology. And that is something that the United Nations and my office, the Office of the Envoy on Technology, is very committed to do, working in partnership with all stakeholders.
Many thanks, Mrs. Chang, for your insightful remarks. And it's certainly humbling to see how much work you're all accomplishing. I will turn to Hoda to see if we have questions from the audience. There is not so much time left, but I will try to see if we can efficiently tackle a few questions and send them to the right panelists so that they can elaborate on their remarks. Hoda, do you have questions for us?
Yes, indeed, I do.
Have some, but okay.
Yes, indeed, I do. I do have one question from the audience, and this could be for anyone on the panel. You can choose whoever feels comfortable answering this one. So, how are algorithms impacting children analyzed? Do they form a different ethical path than the ones for adults, for example, in auditing? So, are the paths different for children than adults? What do you think?
Can I
you
take
want to
this
start, Hoda?
Yeah, Eleanor, I can take this question. Thank you for the question. And I think it is, we're very much, I would say we're very at a fragile stage of analyzing algorithmic maturity when it comes to their deployability in AI frameworks. Algorithmic biases and algorithmic, concerns and threats are a very, very evident concern at the moment. And debiasing the algorithm is a global effort, is another global effort that took a grassroots. Few of the big tech companies are just having a huge, efforts behind it. But the work is still, I think, immature in my opinion, and we need to put a global task force behind it, because even the debiasing approach is a very generic approach where we are trying to debias specific issues from a specific 80 biases landscape or cognitive biases landscape from these algorithms that has been placed by the developers within the AI platforms. Is it enough to do it this way? No, absolutely not. The question is amazing because it inspires us that we need to actually put children as a developer and as part of the debiasing. I wouldn't say the debugging aspects because debugging is a minor issue at the moment for us when we are talking about algorithms. But the debiasing aspects of the algorithm or the health check aspects of algorithms across boards. I think this should be the global norm and the global regulation and governance structure where everybody who is developing algorithms, they need to make sure that they are including children as part of the cycle of verification process.
Thank you so much, Hoda. Let me see if some of the other panelists want to say a word about it. And I think the question was also, to some extent, is there a different ethical pathway or form of ethical auditing when you distinguish between how children will be using the application or adults? I don't know if either Ecem or Professor Zeng or Mrs. Chang, if someone wants to add a few quick thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would like to add in a way that when we're making decisions based on AI, we were thinking that we were more familiar with adults, and then the decision should be more mature. But when it comes to children, there are many problems. For example, for the emotion recognition in the classroom cases that I mentioned, that if you're making a decision based on the AI algorithm saying that, oh, they're not focused on in the class, but actually no, they're not just they're not focused. They have their own way to interact in the class. So you just don't understand the way that the children are interacting in this context. So AI should only be used as assistant, and also in the case that I'm talking about, I think this is one of the most horrible design that I could imagine for the next generation.
Ecem or Mrs. Chang, I don't know if you want to add to this or if we move to the next question, let me know.
I mean, just to add that this is a classic pacing problem, and it's not just a case of just adults and children. The fact that, for instance, policymakers ourselves, when we are trying to come up with ways of looking at new technologies, we're behind the pace of technology all the time.
Ecem, do you want to say a word, or I give you the next question? Maybe we'll see. I'm sure we have more.
I don't think that there's anything else I could add. Everything's been said perfectly.
Thank you so much, Hoda. We have a quick. We can have a last one, or is it too short or timing left?
I think unfortunately we need to keep going forward for this moment. But Eleonore, if you have just some short words that you'd like to end with yourself.
Yeah. I mean, everyone else deserves as much to close than myself here. But I was going to say just that a more equal and peaceful world actually will not appear by chance, and we see this through what our panelists have said. So we need to foster a more inclusive and cosmopolitan conversation to anticipate and shape not only the risks but also the promises of AI. And I think that came across the panel too. So in this regard, please let me thank our panelists again for their exceptional engagement with the topic of today, and I really mean it. And thank UNICEF and the Ministry of Finland, the audience, all actors that have made it possible to collaborate together on building a child-friendly AI future. Thank you so much. Thank you for your thoughts.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
guys.
Eleonore, and all of you in the panel. It was really, really crucial points in the discussion there. That was lovely. Great. Thank you so much.